My name is Catherine Matson, and I will be presenting on the disability deaf-blindness. According to the IDEA law, deaf-blindness is defined as concomitant or simultaneous hearing and visual impairments, the combination of which causes such severe communication and other developmental and educational needs that they cannot be accommodated in special education programs solely for children with deafness or children with blindness. So, what that means is children with deaf-blindness have an impairment in both their vision and their hearing that programs for only deaf children or only blind children cannot accommodate all of their needs. So the key feature of deaf-blindness is that the combination of losses limits access to auditory and visual information. A little bit more information. In America, there are approximately 45,000 to 50,000 people with deaf-blindness, 10,000 of which are under 21 years old. So that's 1/5 of those who have this are children, and that will be in our care as teachers. Like I said, this disability refers to any degree of loss in both hearing and vision, which accounts for a wide range of the severity of the disability. So, for example, some students have a severe hearing loss, but maybe they can see a lot better, as another student may hear better than they can see, or maybe have a mild case of both, or very severe case. More than 90% of deafblind children also have additional disabilities or health problems. A well-known person with deafblindness is Helen Keller, and she was completely blind and completely deaf from birth. Students with deafblindness, we need to be aware of how their learning is affected. 80% of what we learn, what everyone learns, is visual, and hearing is the basis of communication and language. So you can imagine when those two channels are blocked, a lot more is going to be affected in the child's development and communication skills. So here at the bottom of the screen are some other areas of development that are affected by their disability. So in addition to communication and language, you have motor development and movement, cognitive development, which we have to be aware of as teachers, because that plays a key role in how we help them learn. They also can have or struggle with emotional and social development, or body image and self-concept. Researchers have found a number of causes for deaf-blindness. It can be hereditary. For instance, if a child has Usher syndrome, and this has 3 types. Type 1, this child is born deaf, and they lose their vision later on, like in their teenage years. So this applies to early elementary teachers as well as secondary education teachers. Type 2 of Usher syndrome is where a child is born hard of hearing, so they have some hearing and then they lose their vision later. And type 3 is where they're born with normal vision and hearing, or they have mild hearing loss, and then they lose both later in life. There are also causes that happen at birth or later, such as birth trauma, brain injury, optic nerve atrophy, other things like that, that can cause this. So how do people with deaf-blindness communicate? There are various methods, and it depends on the severity of their disability. Like I said, some students may be able to see a lot better than others, or they can hear better than others, or vice versa. So for some students, American Sign Language will work, and they communicate with an interpreter. Often, because they have an impairment in their vision, their interpreter needs to stand a lot closer to them. And if say, for instance, they have impairment in their peripheral vision, then their interpreter needs to stand directly in front of them and sign right where they can see. Tracking is where the interpreter signs what they're saying, and the person with deaf-blindness holds their hands and feels, or holds their wrist as they're moving and feels how their hands move. Tactile finger spelling is where the interpreter holds the hand of the person with deaf-blindness and signs letters, so spells things out on their hand, which is similar to print on palm. Print on palm is where you draw the letter, like with your finger, with the interpreter draws a letter with their fingertip on the palm of the person with deaf blindness. They also can communicate using braille, lip reading if their vision allows that, or speech reading. This is rarely used. Speech reading is where he with deaf blindness holds the face, like the chin and the cheek of the person who is speaking. If interpreters often need to sign slower or wear a contrasting shirt to their skin color to help the deaf-blind person be able to understand what they're saying. This is the deaf-blind manual alphabet, which I talked about a minute ago. It's used in tactile finger spelling. You can see there's the open palm is the person with deaf blindness, and then the signer will sign a letter on their palm and they feel it. This is how Helen Keller communicated with her interpreters and how she learned how to speak and communicate was through this. There's also technology that really helps with face-to-face one-on-one communication. There are screen braille communicators. This is pictured here. You can see on one side there's a keyboard like on a computer, just a standard QWERTY keyboard. This is for the person speaking who does not have the disability. They can type in what they want to say. And then over here, the deaf-blind person in this photo has their finger on a braille reader, and they can feel in braille what the person typed, and then they can type their own response as well. So that's a good one-on-one communication. There's some other technologies such as TTY with braille display. That refers to a braille keypad that is attached to a phone of someone who has deaf blindness. CapTel is similar in that the program will listen to the phone call and then write a caption on a screen. And there's also braille note takers. So students who have deaf blindness, where do they learn? As teachers, we're concerned of how these students will work and interact with the students in our general education classroom. If you can see from these stats, 39% are in separate classrooms, 16% in separate public schools, and 10% in public or private residential facilities, and so on. Of all of these, only 15% of the students between the ages of 6 and 21 that have deaf blindness are educated in regular classrooms and resource rooms, such as we will be teaching. And so that may seem like a small number, but it is very important that we as teachers know how to reach out and help these students in our classrooms. And so we're going to talk about that right now. How can we teach? Regardless of what our subject area is, how can we help these students? So the first step is to talk with the student and their parents and figure out what modifications they need. So this means as a teacher going through over your syllabus, talking about your course, what assignments there will be, what requirements and expectations you have, how the exams work, how the classroom is set up, things like this, and get to know the student and their specific severity of their impairments, and then work with them to know what will best help them. And then go from there. If you need help, speak to your school's special services department, or maybe talk to previous teachers that the student has had and find out what worked in their classrooms. Also, use technology. It is there to help. A common device is called assistive listening device. This is basically a microphone that the teacher wears, and the sound is carried to the student, and they can listen and adjust the volume as they need in order to listen to the teacher speak. Also, a school may provide interpreters that can come to class with the student. Also, a note taker, whether that's a buddy in class, you tape your lesson, or the student themselves can use Braille to write out notes. They might need tutors outside of class or readers to help them understand the text. You have to think of how you're going to set up your classroom. Students with deaf blindness often need to sit close so that they can hear, but you also have to be aware of what they will see and if there will be distractions in their line of sight, or if there will be lighting coming from a window. Is there adequate lighting? Will there be a glare on the screen? You have to ask these kinds of questions. Also, be aware of how your classroom is spaced. Is there room for an interpreter to sit by the student or in front of the student if they need, or for perhaps a guide animal? In all of this, you need to talk with the student and get their feedback of where they think they should sit. And then try some things out, put them one spot, and if that doesn't work, then move them around and help them find the best position for them to learn. When it comes to your assignments, it will help to give them ample time to read and prepare a response to the assignment. If you think back, I talked about how often students with deaf-blindness also have another disability that affects their cognitive development. So they may need a little bit longer time to respond to a prompt or an assignment. It can also help if you have the textbooks or handouts are in a larger print. If you have a classroom with laptops available, you want to use these because the student with deaf-blindness will be able to adjust the font size to best help them. Some other things you may use in your classroom. If you want to show a video, take into consideration your students' need. If they have enough vision that a closed caption is all that they need, that's great. But if their vision is different and the colors will hurt their eyes or their head, maybe not the best idea to show a video. Be aware that dimming the lights can make it worse. If you do show a video, bottom line, always present the information in another way that they will understand. Same thing if you have small groups, make sure each member of the group is aware of their peers' needs and suggest to them that before they say something, they raise their hand or they make sure the student knows that they're talking to them and they can get their attention. Be willing to alternate or give alternative options for exams, whether that's an audio recording or extended time, or maybe having an interpreter with them. This is an example of a slide you should not have on your lecture. Some things that are wrong about this slide that would really hurt or be hard for a student with deaf-blindness to understand. It has small font and a lot of different types of font, which make it confusing to read. There's also lots of colors that blend in with the background and jump out, and it's just really hard to understand what's being said. There's a lot of words and colors going on. So this is an example of how to not present information to your class. You want to make it clear and precise, concise, and stand out from the board in a way that the student with deaf-blindness will be able to see. And finally, mention a few things about your teaching style. Don't walk around. This may make it confusing if the student's trying to read your lips or trying to listen to you. If you're writing on the board, don't turn around and keep talking because that will muffle the sound of your voice and they may not be able to hear you, or the interpreter won't be able to understand what you're saying. Make sure you talk slow enough that the interpreter can keep pace with you. And be sure to include the student. And above all, be patient with them as they're learning and be open in communicating with the student. As teachers, it's our job to make sure that all of our students learn to the best of their ability, regardless of any disability or challenges that they face. Thank you.